Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of part 1. Siege of Acre. Acre? See, I said Acre because that's how you spell it, but it was wrong. I hate when I do that. I hate when other channels do that. They start talking and they just... And I do that, and I apologize. It annoys me when I say other people do it. So... it's been a busy day. As people know, I travel the world and save crocodiles from house fires. So, I'm on a break now, so let's get back into it.
The Crusader camp had received some breathing room for expansion after Saladin's army began rearranging itself behind them. Further sea reinforcements arrived at the end of October, including numerous barons and 400 Danish warriors, accompanied by the nephew of King Canute VI.
King Canute, what a name.
Crusaders now dug protective ditches on both sides of their tents.
Oh, they're dug.
They filled these with sharpened stakes and metal running the length of the camp from the bay to the Mediterranean. These trenches were fronted by earthen ramparts and wooden palisades. Then came the rain squalls and heavy mists, heralding the coming of winter weather. As the year 1189 came to a close, nature brought relief to the Muslims. The brusque winter, although not snowy, brought with it winds strong enough to blow away tents atop the Tauron. Worse, Christian ships could not remain anchored due to the rough conditions. Most of the fleet thus left at the end of October or became fuel for campfires. But the situation in the city was becoming desperate. Cut off from supplies in the winter weather, the starved and desperate garrison of Acre opened negotiations with the Crusaders. The terms were simple. They would capitulate in exchange for their lives. This, however, was foolishly declined by the glory-seeking Crusaders.
Oh, I hate him so much.
And fortunately for the garrison,
you gee of shitface, you were set free. Saladin could have killed you. He didn't. Oh, I hate this guy. Oh, I hate this guy so much. Oh, I want him to die so much.
Ayyubid reinforcements were en route from the sea. The daring Armenian Muslim admiral Hossam ad-Din Lulu saw a chance to whisk men and supplies into Acre without worrying about the heavy Crusader blockade. On December 17, 1189, he led 50 Egyptian galleys into the harbour, using Greek fire to brush aside the few Crusader ships that engaged him.
Oh, wow.
Acre's garrison cheered at the sight of the arriving fleet. The stalemate ended on Easter Sunday, March 25, 1190, when a new Crusader fleet of 50 vessels from Tyre, led by Conrad of Montferrat, appeared off the Mediterranean coast, tacking south towards Acre. Guy of Lusignan and Conrad had reconciled their differences, and Conrad was on his way to support Guy's siege camp. Before navigating past Acre's port, Conrad's fleet was intercepted by Muslim ships. The naval battle lasted for the better part of the day, as Greek fire and volleys of arrows and bolts were exchanged. But the Christians managed to drive off the Muslim fleet and deliver the badly needed supplies and reinforcements to Guy's camp. Fresh Crusader troops continued to pour in throughout March and April, allowing Guy to stage surprise attacks that broke Saladin's supply lines and isolated Acre. The rainy days of spring soon turned into the warm months of summer, and the soggy ground dried out. The Crusaders constructed siege towers with wood brought by Italian merchant ships. 4 stories high and capable of holding up to 500 men, these movable towers loomed as high as the walls of Acre. They were covered with hides soaked in vinegar and urine, which the Crusaders believed provided protection from the defenders' Greek fire. The towers were ready by the end of April. The sight of the colossal
soaked in vinegar and urine, you think that protects you? You know what else would protect you? To just go eat badger poop. Yeah, that'll help too. But you gotta catch the badger and then hold it up and squeeze the turds out of them right into your mouth. Like an ice cream machine. There were some weird things that they believed back in the day.
Contraptions struck fear into the Acre garrison, who entered into a second negotiation with the Crusaders. Once again, though, the Crusaders refused, believing their siege engines would win them the glorious victory they craved.
Glorious.
On May 5th, 1190, the Crusaders renewed the assault. As the massive towers rumbled forward, archers on the platforms battled against the Muslim bowmen on the walls. Meanwhile, thousands of Christian peasant soldiers and camp followers scurried to fill the city's moat with rocks and fascina of brush to allow the towers to pass over the ditch. Finally, the bridge from the first tower dropped on the city parapet. The Crusaders inside piled out onto the walls, but as they pushed their way further, a most horrific sight unfolded behind them. The defenders loaded their artillery with specially mixed explosive jars of Greek fire and fired them at lumbering towers. All 3 towers caught fire.
Oh, wow.
For a time the wood creaked ominously, before one by one the towers crumbled, with everyone inside cruelly perishing in the flames. Those Crusaders who managed to storm the walls from the first tower were subsequently cut down to a man and thrown off. The May 5th assault had failed miserably.
The Muslims here have no incentive to let these people live. None. Being burned alive in one of those. Oh.
Throughout June, the 2 armies clashed for 8 successive days, the heat baking the growing mounds of bodies piling around the siege camp and walls. Thick black clouds of flies floated around the dead, and disease gripped both Muslim and Christian camps alike. For nearly a month afterwards, little action took place. Tired of the waiting game, Crusader men-at-arms opted for another assault on St. James's Day, July 25th. Their goal was to punch through the Muslim lines north of Acre. The initial shock of the Crusader peasant pikemen and axemen caught Saladin's men off guard, who seemed to have been slightly out of formation. But this was a trap. As the pikemen pushed forward, Saladin's brother Al-Adil lured the poorly trained Christian footmen into his camp. There, the attack gradually devolved into plundering and looting of the Muslim tents. Saladin then sent Egyptian and Mosul reinforcements to trap the enemy in the camp. Worse,
I thought he was about to say, and then they fled, and there was alcohol in there, and they got drunk, and then they came in and killed them. I was just saying that.
The Christian attack was poorly coordinated, with only a few dozen knights joining the charge, led by Ralph de Hauterive, Archdeacon of Colchester. Now the attacking contingent was at serious risk of being wiped out, but Ralph and his armoured retinue of knights managed to carve a path through the Muslim lines to escape. But the damage to the Crusader ranks was terrible, as up to 9,000 fell in this failed attack,
Oh my gosh.
including Ralph himself. 3 days later, on July 28th, 10,000 Crusader reinforcements arrived in camp under Henry of Champagne. Henry's contingent was the vanguard of a massive Frankish army en route to the Holy Land under King Philippe II of France. By the fall of 1190, the English contingent headed by Baldwin, Archbishop of Canterbury, landed and informed the besiegers that King Richard I of England had embarked for the Holy Land. However, it would be some time before either Philippe or Richard arrived at Acre. Then news reached Saladin that Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa had died on June 10th while crossing a shallow river near Armenia. Although leadership passed on to his son Frederick of Swabia, the German contingent of the Crusader army fell apart. Many German nobles returned to Europe, and a few that remained under the Duke of Swabia suffered from famine and became bogged down battling Muslim, Seljuk and Kurdish tribesmen. Only 5,000 survivors reached Tripoli, finally moving to join the siege against Acre in October. Back at Acre for several weeks, Henry of Champagne attempted numerous assaults on the city, using battering rams and scaling ladders. But Crusader fortunes worsened as Muslim sallies from Acre's gates destroyed Henry's siege engines in early September. In the harbour, the Christian fleet launched an attack of their own. Attempting to destroy the Muslim harbour defence, on September 24th they sent explosive ramming vessels against the Tower of Flies. But just as the vessels were about to collide with the tower, the winds abruptly shifted and the ships began colliding with each other.
Oh no.
Amidst the chaos, a few small Muslim raiding ships launched a sortie of their own. With thick black smoke engulfing the harbour, they passed virtually unnoticed, their sights set on the heavily fortified and specially built Pisan ship, which they proceeded to set ablaze unopposed. Once the Christians realized what was happening, the Muslim sortie already turned and made their way back. Christian naval supremacy over Acre once again ended with the early onset of cold weather. Throughout the winter of 1190 to 91, plague and famine beset the Crusader camp. Intestinal fever took thousands of troops, desperately huddled together in the frigid cold outside the walls of Acre. Henry of Champagne was afflicted, barely clinging on to life. Frederick of Swabia became sick with malaria and died on January 20th, 1191. Food supplies diminished rapidly by early spring, with common soldiers getting by on scraps of grass or chewing bare bones. Crowds gathered to fight over scraps of dead horses, with even the beasts' entrails being eaten by the famished troops. Relief finally came to the Crusaders on April 20th, 1191, when King Philippe of France landed with vital supplies of grain and corn, as well as fresh soldiers and siege engines. King Richard of England was on his way to Tyre 7 weeks later, on June 8th, bringing 25 ships with him, fresh from his conquest of the Kingdom of Cyprus. On approach, he briefly engaged a Muslim fleet sallying out of the harbour to intercept the incoming English reinforcements, but nevertheless got through. Philippe, 8 years older than Richard, wanted to lead the army based on his leadership experience in France against the English. He preferred to continue a slow, intricate siege against Acre until it finally capitulated. The Crusader leadership, however, deferred to Richard, nicknamed the Lionhearted, who was reputed to be a fierce fighter, famed for leading his men in close hand-to-hand battles.
Okay.
Richard identified his target straight away, the Cursed Tower. He had one trebuchet, nicknamed Bad Neighbor, and a heavy catapult owned by the Knights Hospitallers, known as the Stone Thrower, aimed for the Cursed Tower at the northeast corner of Acre's walls. The rest of the artillery were ordered to strike elsewhere. Bombardment began on June 14th. The Templars focused on the eastern walls, while the Duke of Burgundy's catapults fired at the northern coastal fortifications. In time, Richard's own siege artillery joined in the endless bombardment, but both he and King Philippe were sick and bedridden. Crusader war machines lobbed stones past the walls into the city market. Hits from the Hospitaller artillery finally demolished a 30-square-foot section of the wall adjacent to the Cursed Tower. Late June consisted of light skirmishing outside the city. Saladin's advance guard probed the Crusader rear defenses as the Christians continued pummeling Acre with stones. Muslim hopes for relieving the siege faded, even as Saladin received needed reinforcements in his camp. Matters only worsened for the Muslim defenders as the Christians began launching assaults on the walls starting on July 2nd. Richard organized round-the-clock attacks. Wave after wave of infantry, archers, and artillery attempted to breach the city's crumbling fortifications. Attempts to scale the walls failed. The grueling operation came at an ever-increasing cost to men and material, but Richard was determined. Meanwhile, Philip's sappers tunneled their way towards the walls. Their aim was to reach the Cursed Tower. The artillery bombardment collapsed parts of the tower, which opened a gaping hole in the fortifications. Richard's focused fire finally paying off. Committing any able-bodied man who could bear arms to the breach, the Muslim defenders were barely able to fend off the attacking Crusaders. Saladin launched his own attacks to relieve the defenders in Acre. But despite
I was wondering if he was even still there anymore.
Fierce and prolonged fighting, his troops were unable to break through the ring of besiegers.
Yeah, they're too set.
Swimmers carried messages from the city to the gathered emirs, pleading for help. A final appeal was sent out on July 7th. On July 11th, Philippe's sappers dug beneath the partially collapsed Cursed Tower and successfully demolished the rest, further widening the gap in the walls. By this point, Acre's defenders were too weak to man the breach. In desperation, they used Greek fire, killing 40 Crusaders on July 11th.
Damn.
Those were the last Christian casualties of the siege. With the night fast approaching, no one yet knew that the siege of Acre was over. As the sun rose over Acre on July 12, 1191, the siege entered its 653rd day. One of the longest sieges of the Middle Ages at last drew to a close as the city's defenders, against Saladin's wishes, surrendered to the Crusaders. Around 19,000 Christian troops had been killed during the terrible siege, with the city's garrison losing anywhere between 5,000 to 10,000 men, and the relief army under Saladin also suffering terribly. The final savage act of the siege took place after Acre's capitulation. Richard the Lionheart ordered the execution of 2,700 survivors of the Acre garrison, probably because Saladin had refused to pay 200,400 gold pieces for their ransom and declined to return the piece of the true cross taken at Hattin. By the end of the siege, the rift between the Crusader leadership had widened. King Philip of France and Leopold of Austria angrily returned to their homelands in Europe, taking their contingents with them. Richard took the exhausted yet victorious Crusader army further into the Holy Land to continue his campaign against Saladin, setting his sights on retaking Jerusalem. The siege of Acre was but the first bloody chapter of the Third Crusade. If you stayed around this far,
I don't think that was really Lionheart versus Saladin so much. I mean, they were on the battlefield. but they really didn't fight. That was good. I hate when people get executed. And I understand, yeah, there was a ransom and stuff like that. I hate that. But put me in that situation, I can't tell you I would have done anything differently. Especially when that I hate him, guy, when he so easily was set free and then he turned around and rejoined. You can't have that happen. This is good. I'm going to go ahead and end this in loving memory of Mimi. Sorry, it's right down here. Okay. I'm going to end this here. I'm going to end it here. I hate that. Okay. Like and subscribe. And until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.